No football talk because I don't want to talk about 5 interceptions. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, November 21st, 2017.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, USA Today Sports.
And I am not Nathan Peterman. I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. A lot of news. We weren't sorry. We have to apologize for not being here on Monday. Some logistical problems and some technical problems. So, but I will be here for the rest of the week, and hopefully we'll be able to do. We're probably not doing a show on Thanksgiving, folks. But
no, we're not. We're not. No,
I'll be cooking the turkey, so I'm sorry. I can't do two things.
Me too. I had to go shopping for it today and got out with an inch of my life, so
there were about 5 billion people at Mike Kroger last night. I was not shopping I was just there to pick up something, some soap and stuff. And
that's a bad idea, Kev. This time of the year.
No, it was a rookie mistake. It really was a rookie mistake.
There's a Walmart around the corner from me. I'm staying as far away from that as possible because I have a feeling that the local police will be there to corral everybody because it'll be like bloodletting.
This is like when you need something like that, Kev, you go to like a Walgreens or a Rite Aid. You don't go near the supermarket. I went early today, and the corral that came on after me, I just got out in time, and you have to make quick decisions. I think you have to make as quick a decision shopping for Thanksgiving as you do on the ice in hockey.
Well, I've got an interesting development in my Thanksgiving preparation. I was going to cover the Lions game. I had been assigned to cover it, and then they changed their mind yesterday and decided that they didn't need me to cover it. And we held our Thanksgiving for my wife's family on Saturday, so I feel like we've already had Thanksgiving. So now, we're not going to have another Thanksgiving. So what are we going to do? We're thinking actually to go out for Chinese, which will
Chinese would be a good move.
Wednesday is the biggest party night of the year, and Christmas Eve, that's my tradition on those 2 nights is Chinese, and then basically sequester myself away. I don't want to be out there because it's absolutely nuts. So anyway.
Yeah. So we'll have to, it'll be a football day on Thanksgiving to be sure. And I'm actually going to the Ohio State-Michigan game on Saturday. So
that's a big game, yeah.
Yeah, that will be. Well, it's just a rivalry game. It doesn't have all that much meaning in the standings, but
that's a huge event.
Oh yeah. Having lived in the state most of my life, I can tell you that's true. So,
okay, let's start with not on the NHL page, but the international or the Olympic situation. Now, interesting tweet that came out yesterday from Bob McKenzie of TSN. He had talked to Rene Fassel regarding the situation with the KHL, who is threatening right now to, ban their players from going to the Olympics. I believe it's because it's a leverage play because there's talk of the IOC banning the entire Russian team because of the drug meldonium and other cheating on drug testing. Well, the KHL and the IIHF have an agreement in place, unlike the IIHF and the NHL. So if USA Hockey or Hockey Canada requests their players from the KHL, they have to give those players, give access to those players. Otherwise, they face IIHF sanctions. And according to Igor Urenko, a Russian reporter who I follow on Twitter, who's pretty good, he says that that Hockey Canada has, and so is USA Hockey and other countries as well. So now the ball, Kevin, is sort of in the KHL's court here. Do they really want to go to war with the IIHF?
Yeah, no, I was told that it was a non-story, that nobody in the NHL was worried about it, that, the ramifications were too difficult for even the Russians to swallow. They never mind mixing it up, as we all know, with the NHL or the IHF, but they just didn't feel that they would start a nuclear exchange over this. So, most everyone's operating as if, this will get, kind of resolved and they'll stand down and it will work out. Now, it wouldn't be the end of the world, in my opinion, even if it does happen. Basically what it'll mean, the team that will suffer is the Russians, depending on who they were going to let in because of the drug situation. But, there's more Russian players playing in the KHL than any other country. And sure, does Canada have KHL players? Yes, and so does the U.S. But they also have players playing in the other leagues who are going to make their teams as well. So there would still be a team, and I don't think it would change the chances of either Canada or the U.S. of being successful. It probably would make Sweden a little bit stronger because and even Finland as well, because those two leagues would have the most players in that would be playing in the Olympics then.
Well, Russ, Canada had, I think it was for the Karjala Cup, they had 16 Canadian players that were from KHL teams. Now the whole situation is moot, because if they have access to those players, they're going to play in the Olympics. But if they don't, my scenario is, okay, where are they going to go? I think they'd probably have, the Hockey Canada would have to talk to the CHL and letting in more players who are probably going to play in the World Junior. So, I mean, that's probably a scenario that's not going to happen. But when this first came out and there was a threat of them shutting out KHL players, no matter what nationality, it sounded to me like that was the direction that Hockey Canada was going to have to go.
Well, here's my thought, though. And this is, Kev, you may know the answer, you may not. None of us may know the answer. But if WADA's not letting those Russian players play, the Americans and Canadians who play in that league, shouldn't they be drug tested before they're allowed to join their teams? Because they're in that league, they could be doing the same thing.
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that, but in answer to Mike's question, the Americans have more than 200 players playing in Europe, and those 200 players are not all in the KHL. In fact, only a fraction of them. And the same is true of Canada. I bet Canada has. I mean, I'm just guessing because I don't really have any idea, but I bet they have 300 or 400. So, I mean, there'll be plenty of players. Now, their best players are in the KHL because, that league pays the best money. But I'll bet, there are a multitude of players in the Swiss league, Canadian players who will play. And, I mean, I don't think they'd have to take, maybe they would like some from the CHL, but I just can't, you can fill it with pros in Europe. There's no doubt in that.
I'm sure they're prepared for every eventuality. I mean, if they, they have a list, including KHL, not including KHL.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, you're most likely right. But I mean, it's interesting, and I know that, and I sort of agreed with this, the statement that Pierre LeBrun made a couple days ago. It's getting to the point now where if the KHL had, shut the door, that I almost wish that the hockey tournament doesn't happen, because honestly, what it's getting to be the Spengler Cup if it gets to the point where the NHL, the KHL are not going, and it's basically a bunch of pros from the SM Liga and the SHL and the Swiss League.
Well, I mean, it just turns back the clock to the way it used to be.
Sure.
Like, back in the olden days, there was no KHL. And so the Russian league players did come over, but you had Swedish league players and Finnish league players and, college kids, and occasionally some minor pro would catch on, like Mike Eruzione did in 1980. He was, playing in the minors but it was mostly, college players in America and, college players and minor pros and, and from Canada and then the other leagues. So and it used to be great. Like I know there will be people now who will complain about the quality of play, but the Olympics are different. Like, you don't care about skiing, but I guarantee you, if there's a Canada versus US
sure.
Or skiing match, you're watching, and the same will be true as well for this as well. No matter who they pick, it'll be big. People will watch.
It's going to be harder to market though, Kev, because like even you're saying they have to fill out the rosters now. Before it would be like a massive competition, and we'd be wondering, boy, who can make this team? Now it's almost like, well, who's available that can play for this team? Even though you say there's 200 players, they're not going to have 200 players in camp, and it's not like we're going to worry about who the last few cuts are anymore.
Now, let me ask you, how big do you think the Olympic marketing budget is? Because I'd say it's zero.
Yeah, I bet it's zero.
Yeah, I don't think they market at all. I think they just put the people out there and their marketing is who's.
I guess the NHL was their marketing.
Yeah, I mean they don't really market. They never have.
No,
like
they depend. They depend on NBC and CBC to market them because they want the.
I don't think the and that's been the problem is I don't think the international Olympic Committee ever cared who was playing. That, you know, they the way they view it is whoever is there, you know, people will watch, and they will. You know, I mean, we pay a whole lot of attention to sports that we care not about for most of the time, and the same will be true of hockey. You know,
my prediction is it will be a DVR'd affair. People will be just watching hockey on their DVR. I bet you very few will be watching live unless there's a reasonable time that some of these games are played.
Right. Yeah. I mean.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. But that's the case for the Olympics often. So, you know, I mean, the diehards when the NHL players were there would try to get up and watch them live. But, you know, that's sort of been the MO. And, you know, I remember as a kid, what you loved about Canada is they didn't tape delay anything. Like,
right.
It happened in the middle of the morning. You'd like to watch on CBC because they did live. And, you know, the other beauty about Canadian coverage is they gave you the other countries in the U.S. where,
yeah, we had nothing.
Yeah, we show Americans. And that's
we had ABC's tape delay like 4 hours.
Yeah, sometimes worse. Yeah, sometimes for sure. Yeah.
It was always like someone like Chris Schenkel going, "Okay, we'll go to hockey now." You know, like here it is, folks.
I can say that I'm one of the few people in the United States, and it was because I live in Buffalo, which is a border town, and we got CBC and CTV on our cable. I saw the Miracle on Ice live because it was broadcast on I think it was on CTV.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right about that. I did not see it. I was actually in Arizona when that was happening. That's where I was working at the time, and but I knew what had happened because I had the wire.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was working and you know, dealing with that as it happened. But you know, the thing about the Olympics is, like, I just don't believe that people will shun it simply because there's no NHL players. You know,
I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, I just think everybody will. Now, you know, the way people watch the Olympics is they kind of shuttle in and out. Like, you know, the difference between when you watch it when the NHL players are there is there's more of a commitment to it. Mm-hmm. But the number of people who will watch it around the world will be very similar. You know, it just won't be the same the way of watching it. But it's big. Like,
there won't be a lot of live tweeting of it. I guarantee you that.
Yeah, the thing. Well, we never, you know, when didn't have NHL players, we didn't have, you know, Twitter back then. Right. But I can tell you, I covered it obviously before NHL players, and it was huge. Like, and nobody had ever heard of the players.
Right.
Like, you know, nobody knew who those players were. I tell the story all the time of writing about Ray LeBlanc, and, you know, he became a household name. And a lot of people who watched the NHL players didn't know who they were. You know, in 2010,
I think part of the problem is now, Kev, we do know these players, and we do know they're not good enough for the NHL. That's the problem.
Well, but I'm not so sure of that. Like, the audience for Olympics is different.
It is, but you still want to see greatness. It's the Olympics.
Well, you would prefer that, but, you know, my point is you know, Mike Brem, my former boss, talk about in 2010 in Vancouver, which really wasn't that long ago. In 2010, that was at the time when everybody was doing chats. That was the big thing.
Right.
So you were chatting with your readers. And every day we would chat. And always the number one question every day of that Olympics for Mike and I was, what team does Ryan Miller play for? The number one question. So many people wanted to know it. They had no idea where he had come from and what he was doing and how it worked. Like, they just didn't know who he was.
Come on. Buffalo is the center of the universe. We know that.
The point is you know what that you know hit home is that though the NHL has expanded their footprint, you know, significantly from the days even 20 years ago, it still isn't as national as you would like it to be. So I think the same will be true as well. There'll be a lot of fans that aren't NHL fans that would tune in. That you know, to them it's, you know, last time I got a number of emails from people who had never watched hockey before and were fascinated by Alex Ovechkin. They just found the whole situation with him in Russia and, you know, getting criticized and everything. They would ask me questions about him and so forth. So and they have no idea, like, what his NHL history was about. So,
well, okay, we've reached the quarter pole in the NHL. I wrote a report card of the the Leafs and got some negative feedback on it because they thought I was too harsh on a team that was 7 games over 500. But let's look at like the early candidates, especially for the Calder. I saw Clayton Keller last night with the Coyotes. They beat the Leafs 4-1. He had a couple assists on their 2 power play goals. And Russ, I've seen him play before, obviously, but it's always different when you see him in person. I totally impressed with his composure and his playmaking ability. To me, he's the leader right now after 20 games.
Yeah, he's the only guy from this class that, again, I'll use the tag future superstar with. And again, we're only scratching the surface with him this year because, Arizona was askew for the first X amount of games. Now they're finally playing better. New coach. These are all tough things for a rookie to be dealing with. And yet he's got double-digit goals, and people can see the playmaking ability, the breakaway speed, and also the defense. Like Kevin had talked about early on, like, hey, he is a good defensive player. It doesn't matter that he's a minus. The whole team was a minus at one time. But the thing about Keller is, on the power play, he's as good as Gaudreau on the power play. Like, once the puck is given to him on the power play, the other team really doesn't know what's going to happen next because he can see some of those things that you don't even know were there, man. That there's a little crease. He has an idea of where the other player is going to go. He's going to shoot it, and he could snipe it. Like, he's just such a great guy to watch. And it's, Chaika was on Sports Central the other day and said, hey, when we drafted him, and I give him tons of credit for drafting him because I can't believe teams passed on him. I'm sorry. I know, everybody always has these excuses. Hey, we didn't know. It's not because of his size, whatever. But Chaika said something that was very smart. He said, hey, we took him in that spot, and we believed that if it worked out, we had ourselves like a first overall quality pick. And that's exactly what they've got.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He's exceeded expectations, and I think it isn't just about the scoring; it's just how he's doing it. Like, if you watch him, and Russ hit the nail right on the head, you see a guy who with potential greatness, not quite there yet, but he will be. And he creates a lot of open ice out there by his how savvy he is in terms of finding the seams and moving in and out of players, and anticipating where the puck's going to go. Like, he's all of that. There are some other players. I mean, as many of you know, I do the podcast with Tom Laidlaw, who played more than 700 games in the NHL, and he's been watching Will Butcher. He's watched a lot of Devils games, and he just raves about him. And the last time I talked to John Hines recently, and what he said he was most impressed about is not the offensive ability, which, to me, has been transformative for the Devils. Like, I think he's really helped their offense by his ability to move the puck out of his zone, but his commitment to become better defensively. That's where they believe he's made the most strides since he turned pro. Like, they say, like, every game he's really gotten better and better, and to the point now where, there's a lot of trust in his defensive ability because he's worked at it. So I think he's right up there. And Barzal, which I think Russ likes, a player Russ likes a lot. And I haven't seen as much of him. I've seen a little bit of him. He's pretty impressive. I know there were some scouts in the East who told me about him before the season that they felt he was really getting overlooked, and it's turned out to be true. He is a guy who I think has he didn't come out of nowhere because people knew who he was, but I think that he's probably had a more significant impact than most people realized he would have. Although I got to give some scouts credit because they were saying this guy's going to be really good, like right now. So, and he is.
I'll say this about Barzal: it's not that people were hesitant. We were hesitant to see what the Islanders would do with him because, I felt like he was probably good enough last year, but with all the turmoil, he didn't get to play enough last year. And so I think that was the issue. And he only played 2 games last year. Like, he should have played more. So I think this year everybody felt pretty good about the player. We just didn't know the role. Now that he's getting top line play, power play, those kinds of things, now you could see what he is. Like, he's always been a great playmaker. He's always been very smart, very fast. He did need to get stronger, and I pointed out on this show maybe like 2 years ago, over the summer, I saw him get stronger. So that's why I thought last year would be a good year for him. and then it just didn't work out. It was sort of like a numbers game. But right now, he's as talented as any young player that's come up. I mean, he really is, and he has exceptional vision. Like, that's the thing you cannot teach him. And look, he's got 15 assists. I mean, it's amazing. Like, that's a high amount. He did it 5 in one game, but he's still producing, and I'm watching him, and I'm really happy with Butcher. I was probably on this show the first guy to talk about him breaking away from Colorado, and I had always watched him in the U.S. system. The thing about Butcher is everybody was only talking about his offense, the power play, the offense, the whatever. He's always been a pretty good defender, but because it wasn't one of those things that was exciting to talk about, everybody would talk about his offense, and it was on display in the Frozen Four and during his championship season.
Russ, they were also talking about his size because he's only 5'10", and that was
some were talking about, some who didn't have an idea. You know, I did debate a lot of people about Will Butcher, saying that I felt like he'd play this year in the NHL and definitely would start. And there were people, prospect people, that absolutely debated me. But again, and I just think that's just a product of not enough people watching like NCAA hockey close enough. Juniors gets watched a ton. NCAA hockey gets watched a lot, but there's a lot of pundits who do both that definitely are leaning a lot heavier towards the junior hockey side and don't see enough of a guy like that. And so once it's after his draft year, they lose track of him. They just say, oh, yeah, he's good. But I'm telling you, this is how teams clean up in free agency. You have to be able to schmooze them, and Ray Shero schmoozed them. And then you have to be able to have a role for them, and they've got a role for him. And he has transformed that defense.
Just so we don't get accused by the West Coasters and Vancouver Canucks fans for ignoring a legitimate candidate. Yeah. Brock Besser has 17 points in 17 games and has played wonderfully for them. Alex Kerfoot, 15 points in 19 games for
he's exceeded Colorado. Expectations for me. I've written about him on Sportsology. We've talked about him on this show. Part of the rise of the Avalanche has been Alex Kerfoot, because he really is that guy that can do everything. He is that guy that plays good defense. He's that guy that can really move with the puck. He's the guy that can play second power play. He really does everything. I know people, when he was in Philly, were probably tired of watching, looking at tweets for me about him. But he's literally transformed the same game that I watched him do in Harvard to the NHL. And that's partially a credit to him and partially a credit to Ted Donato, who will definitely be an NHL coach whenever he wants to.
And I have to mention Kevin, because I think he's played really well for arguably the league's best team is Sergachev in Tampa Bay. And he may not win the Calder because he may not score enough points, but this is a top pairing defenseman. I mean, and we're seeing him at age 19. I mean, he's not skipping a beat. There's no growing pains here. He's an NHL defenseman right now.
Yeah, let me say this. I had Besser ranked in my top 3 going into the season, and I don't think it's unthinkable that he could actually pass, Clayton Keller. Besser has the potential to just have a monstrous season, because he's getting a lot of opportunity there, and he's getting stronger as the season goes on.
And he's got some better veterans to play with, and that could help him too.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The talent around him, and he's got such a shot. Like, Besser's shot is really fun to watch. And I agree with Mike on Sergachev too. I'm not so sure that he won't be there at the end. He's getting, when you look at his offensive production to minutes played, it's pretty impressive. And I think he'll get more minutes because he's a difference maker on there. So I don't think, as much as I think Clayton Keller has been the best thus far, and I think he has potential to be great, I don't think it's a slam dunk that he's going to win the award.
No, it's not a slam dunk, which is good for NHL rookies. But the other thing that I'm hearing, which I hate, and me as a voter and Kevin, you as a voter, is I don't care who the best rookie plays for. But I am hearing this talk and chatter from some writers, but most of it online, that, well, he plays for Arizona, so, the writers aren't going to give him a fair chance because it's Arizona. And it's like, why? I don't buy it. I don't get it. But there is that feeling out there, and I hear it and I see it once in a while.
Well, as the former president of the Writers Association, I knew how the balloting went, and that's not how they vote. I mean, maybe they talk like that, but that's not how they vote. I mean, historically, despite the fact that people said there was a geographic favoritism, and none of it shows up in the voting totals.
It's probably just chatter.
You never see that. So,
let's do one more. The Norris at the quarter poll. I can't argue with some of the speculation that Alex Pietrangelo of the Blues is one of the leading candidates, simply because, and I saw the Blues take apart the Leafs a few weeks back. Pietrangelo is jumping up in the rush and being more offensive than he's ever been in his career, and the credit was given to the fact that he doesn't have to cover up for Shattenkirk anymore, and he's more involved in the offense because Shattenkirk is not there, and he's got 19 points in 21 games. I never thought he'd be that much of an offensive defenseman, but he's proving that he can be, Kevin.
Well, I thought he was going to be that good, and I offensively, because he always showed signs of it. But they had Shattenkirk, and they didn't need him to do that, and he had to play against the top players in the league, and he's 6'3", and he had to clear the crease and take care of that, and it was priority one was his defensive game. But you're absolutely right. The best thing that happened to him was the departure of Kevin Shattenkirk, and what's helped him, and I think this does help. The fact he has been instrumental to the Blues' rise, I think, is helping him. There's a long way to go, but I think he's a guy who's paid his dues, and I think the writers have watched him now, and they're seeing a guy who's really sort of blossoming and taking it to his final level. He's really been good this year.
Yeah, no question. And he also, without Jay Bouwmeester, he has to be the guy. Now, Bouwmeester's coming back, but when he wasn't there, he had to be the guy. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, and the thing
is nice, but he's not everything on offense.
That's true. The thing is if you look at the race for the Calder, there are three guys who are going to be in the running, no matter what, but based partially on the fact that their teams are doing well, but just on their resume. I think Carlson, obviously, Doughty, obviously, and Victor Hedman, because the Lightning are just phenomenal right now. He's got 15 points at 20 games. He's playing 26 minutes a night. He's a beast. And I think
for all those people that 2 years after the draft, they were like, "Oh, I don't know, Victor Hedman might be a bust." For the last couple of years, they've been awfully silent. Every team would love to have a weapon like Victor Hedman. They really would, and he's definitely in the race. Another guy I would still throw in the race would be Ivan Provorov, because, he plays on a defense that's really not that good. He actually has been only taking sometimes only 30-second breaks in between shifts because he's getting used that much. I just looked up his time on the ice, and for a 20-year-old, it's 24:53, which is already up 3 minutes from last year, which I thought was excessive last year. This is a guy who's taken on a boatload of minutes. Now, he only has 10 points in 20 games, but the points part is not his complete game. And this is where I wish the Norris was that all-around trophy, and you didn't have to have the flashy points, because then you would look at this guy and you'd say, you know what, he's got 55 blocks in 20 games. He's on pace to even beat the 166 blocks he had last year. Every team would want a defenseman like this.
Yeah, Kevin, I sometimes think that the Norris is too weighted towards the offensive defenseman. And if you look at the scoring right now for defensemen, Pietrangelo is leading with 19. John Klingberg has got 19. Shattenkirk has got 17. Morgan Riley and John Carlson have got 17. I don't think Klingberg, Shattenkirk, Riley, or Carlson are even close.
No, they're not going to get votes. They might get a few votes.
I think I don't disagree with you, Mike. I think sometimes we do put too much emphasis on the scoring aspect of it, but I do think the writers are smart enough to sort out, guys who are not good defensively, who are just point producers.
Yeah.
Bob McKenzie wrote a really good piece. This was several years ago, which I thought really made a lot of sense. Though he said at some point, although it needs to be a two-way award, at some point the points become so overwhelming, as in Carlson's first year that he won, that they cannot be ignored, and that's what happened. And then Carlson, much to his credit, has become a much better defensive player.
Yes,
as time
he's playing 27 minutes a game. He's second in the league, which is crazy.
And blocking shots like crazy.
Blocking shots, yeah. He's turned into be a real force, and I'm really appreciative of all of his gifts. Like he also is an excellent. He's excellent with the media. He's good on social media. Like he does everything well. He really does. I've just become so impressed with him. He has handled the pressure of being a star well, and I like when I watched that team in the playoffs last year, he is such a force that it's hard to describe. Like he is so dominant with the puck, and he gets back, he covers up, he knows what he's doing. He's a leader. I just like everything about him. Like you want your players to become like Erik Karlsson because he's worked at it. He's put an effort in to become a more complete player.
Yeah, he's more than a point a game, so he's clearly in the conversation. I thought you meant John Carlson. Sorry, John Carlson's averaging 27 minutes a game. Yeah, Eric's averaging 25. I was shocked that John's averaging 27.
And Russ, that is going to pose a big problem for McClellan, the GM of the Capitals, because he's a UFA at the end of this year, and with the numbers he's putting up, and he's been a good defenseman for a long time. Yes. And there is such a hunger for defensemen out there. If he does re-sign with Washington, it's going to cost him a ton, and if he doesn't, he's going to be one or two behind Tavares if he hits free agency in terms of the wish list of other teams.
And little old Drew Doughty too,
Well, he's next year. He's next year.
No. I mean for Norris this year though.
Yeah. Yes.
26 minutes a game, 14 points. He's right in there too.
Yeah, he's terrible, isn't he? Okay, let's take a little bit of tour of the battlefield here. On Friday, the Edmonton Oilers visit Buffalo, the McDavid-Eichel matchup. It always has been anticipated since they went 1-2 in the 2015 draft, but has never turned out to be any kind of rivalry because it's teams in different conferences, and I don't think it's really a natural rivalry. But those two teams right now, Kevin, are really, really struggling. Let's start with Buffalo. Phil Housley demoted Eichel to the third line, and sort of I saw his comments after. He said, I didn't demote him to the third line. I just gave him third line wingers. That's demoting him to the third line. But he hasn't played that well this year. It's been inconsistent. I watched them play Detroit last Friday, and I barely noticed Eichel. And this, after giving him to the $10.5 million, it's got to be concern for the Sabres.
Well, I think concern might be too strong a word, but I think it is fair to say that Eichel hasn't been as good as they had hoped he was going to be. But I've seen enough of Eichel to know that he will be a dominant player. I think the talent level that is in Buffalo just isn't strong enough, just like it isn't strong enough in Edmonton. I think the Edmonton Oilers were our biggest misread in the sports world last year.
I don't know. I had Calgary going to the conference final, so I did have Edmonton making the playoffs, though. I did.
Yeah. Well, I despite the fact that Russ knew what was going to happen, the rest of them thought that the Oilers were going to be a good team, and they clearly are not. Like, when you watch them play, now you're wondering, and we should have known because so many players had career years last year. But I think we just got caught up in the hoopla over Connor McDavid because he's such a talented player. But Talbot has been off this season. Now all of a sudden we're reminded again that they do not have a real true offensive defenseman to get the puck out. They don't generate much from back there. And now they seem short on goal scorers up front. Now, the irony of that is they've traded away Tyler Hall and Jordan Eberle. And,
it is the irony.
And the other issue is, and I talked about this with Jim Matheson, and I really value his opinion. He's covered the team since 1972.
Yeah, he's the guy.
Yeah, he is the guy. And he pointed out, I thought they should have gotten more for Jordan Eberle. I mean, you remember when we talked about this, I didn't like that trade. Right. Ryan Strome really had not lived up to expectations. And I just didn't think Jordan Eberle, say what you want about, whether or not he's going to score in traffic. And, obviously he did perform in the playoffs, but he had scored some goals. He had been a consistent scorer. And there's such a need. I thought they would get someone, who could be a greater help. Now all of a sudden Strom's a third liner. So they traded Eberle, a consistent goal scorer, and you got to have goals, and they got a third liner back. So I thought, when you add that in, but Matheson pointed out that it is just hard in today's game to trade wingers. If you trade a center in defense, you get a lot. But
Eberle was a fourth liner at the end of his, at the end of last year during the playoffs, and which is ridiculous because he is a talent. But that deal, more than anything, Kevin, was a salary dump because Eberle was making $6 million for another couple years, and they were facing the prospect of having to pay Draisaitl and McDavid. And I don't think that it was in their budget to keep Eberle around when he wasn't producing at the level of expectation that they had on him, which I think is going to be a situation with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins once McDavid's contract kicks in next year.
See, but I never understood that because look, if you look at capfriendly.com and go from team to team, everybody is paying 3 players.
Sure.
No, I mean, there's nobody. I mean, look at the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're paying, Malkin and Crosby and Letang, big money, and Phil Kessel, and, everybody has those 3 guys that they got to pay unless, they're not a cap team. Even the Nashville Predators now are paying, 3 guys. And you just got to do that. And I never understood why they didn't feel like they could afford. Now, saying all that, I knew why, it made sense to trade Eberle because even fans had grown weary. He hadn't performed, but I thought they
lost a step. We've heard all of that.
Yeah, we had heard it all. And, maybe it was time and he probably needed to change the scenery, but, they were not in a position, in my opinion, that they had to get something out of that. They couldn't just move him out. Obviously Ryan Strome is an NHL player and he has some value, but I thought they would have gotten.
He's always iffy. Strome has been iffy for 3 seasons now. He has.
Right. Yeah. And I just thought they would get more, but it just brings home that they just weren't as strong as they looked last season when everybody was playing well. So.
And just going back to Buffalo for a second, I have feelings for the Sabres in terms of their situation.
We should play the song "Feelings" now. It would be nice.
Morris Albert. There you go. No,
yeah.
They've had their defense the last 3 years has just been gutted by injuries, and it's happened again this year. Bogosian hasn't played a game. Ristolainen is out week to week with, I think it's an ankle injury. Even the guys that they call up from Rochester who were the veteran, AHLers who could step up to the NHL, like Matt Tennyson and not Justin Falk, but there was another. Taylor Fedun. They're out for 2 months, so their defense has just been decimated. They're not getting the performance they had expected out of Sam Reinhart, and there's been a lot of chatter about him.
Oh, he did score yesterday.
And the Evander Kane situation is hanging over their head because he's having a good year, but he's an unrestricted free agent, and everybody I talk to says there's no way in hell they're signing him to a long-term extension. So this, again, 3 years after they bottomed out and said we're going to tank and we're going to get either McDavid or Eichel, they're in the position where Botterill and Phil Housley may have to live through another rebuild.
Here's the funny thing. I watched a fair amount of that game yesterday, and there was a little fight back in them, but the defense is just askew. There's almost no goalie on earth that could play with that defense. Now, did they overvalue Victor Antipin? They may have. What are we getting to, 18 games that he's played now, something like that?
They weren't alone, Russ. There were people that were interested in him. So
yeah. No, so I know, but I'm just saying, this is, besides injuries, him not being effective has hurt. I'm amazed that the injuries have been what they are. I am, and guys still can't even get on the ice. Do we even get injury? I haven't even heard updates for some of their guys.
I just heard Ristolainen is week to week. It went from day to day to week to week. And when it's a guy who's playing 28 minutes a night, that's not a good diagnosis.
Yeah.
So they're in trouble now. Okay, it wouldn't be. I've been holding my fire on this one because after Saturday, the implosion in Montreal It's just too amusing, I'm somebody who's a fan of Schadenfreude, loves the taking pleasure at other people's demise. And right now the Canadiens are a train wreck. And now, granted, Carey Price is out. There's a lot of mystery around Carey Price and what's going on there. But just watching that team, Kev, there's now starting to be talk of them going the rebuild route because, Pacioretty's not scoring. Drouin so far has not been a fit up the middle. You've got, Weber is still a great defenseman, but other than that, their defense is not good. Everything seems to be going in a negative direction for the Canadiens through the first 20 games.
Yeah, no, and it may be a team that I think the rebuild makes some sense. I don't know that you need to strip it down to the chassis, but you've got to start like the defense really needs a complete overhaul, with the exception of a couple of guys, and they need help up front. They need center ice help. There's too many holes for this team, and if Carey Price, isn't durable and can't play, 60 games a year or 62 games a year, they're going to be in real trouble. So,
here's something we brought up, Kevin. I think when we brought it up a year ago, I remember Mike and I were talking about this, and it got poo-pooed a little bit. Carey Price is starting to have more than a few knee issues now. And I don't know if it's the same knee, but he's only got 2 knees. And, this is something that seems to be playing into, all of this mystery now. It does.
And the thing is that I don't think them holding their cards close to the vest is doing them any favors, especially in Montreal where the speculation runs rampant. Okay, if it's a minor tweak of a knee, then come out and say it's a minor tweak of the knee. I know that this upper body, lower body stuff, and they're not being specific, and all that does is raise the temperature on Bergevin with the fans and the media. Like, what's going on with this guy? We just started paying him $10.5 million, or it's going to kick in next year. He's our franchise, and now we don't know what's going on. And now there's even talk, rumors about him, potentially being traded, which I think are ridiculous. But that's the kind of stuff that comes out of not knowing what exactly is going on.
Yeah, nobody's under the kind of pressure that, even in Toronto, it's not the same as it is in Montreal, where, every time you take a step in Montreal, somebody's writing about it. And, as you said, the rumors just get so out of hand. Like when things are going well in Montreal, there's no greater place to be. It's just so much fun. But boy, when they're not, it's a miserable place. And, I feel sorry for some of the players there, particularly Carey Price. Other than Green Bay Packers quarterback, is there another position in pro sports that faces more pressure than goalie in Montreal?
Goalie in Philly is probably next on the list, but no, there's probably not.
Closer for the New York Yankees might be.
Yeah, no, those are all fair. But the point is that goalie in Montreal is a special position.
Yeah,
it just comes with, and because of the history of who's been in that net and the history of the franchise, and boy, it's just such a mess. And the one thing about the NHL that's kind of sad is that they never seem to have all the teams that they need to have going well. Like, what a great league this would be if Toronto and Montreal were both going well at the same time. Like, how long has it been since that happened?
But we say that every year. Like, hey, that would be great for an original 6. Conference final and yada yada yada, and we never get these things.
Kevin, they haven't faced each other in the playoffs since 1979, and one of the most bitter things that happened coming out of the infamous LA Kings Leafs '93, Doug Gilmour high stick, all that stuff, was that if they had won that series, they would have played the Canadiens in the final, and that there would be like riots in the streets in terms of being overjoyed if the Leafs ever beat the Canadiens in a first round series, let alone in the Stanley Cup final, which it can't happen now because they're both in the same division. But I think everybody in Toronto is yearning for that. Now, Russ, you wanted to talk about something about the Calgary Flames?
Yeah, just because they've had an amazing road trip, and Johnny Gaudreau is now challenging for the league lead in scoring. Again, everybody was worried about Gaudreau. Oh, look, he got his big contract last year. He didn't have a good year. There was a lot of stuff going on in Calgary. It was just a bad, upside-down year for them. Mm-hmm. But they solidified that goalie position. We all knew, like everybody knew, if they could do that, it would be a big deal. And it was interesting because Mike Smith sort of got dropped into the Philly series because he was, slightly injured. There was something, I guess, that he felt was wrong, and he took a couple of days from playing. And he played in that game. He practiced, and I watched the practice, and he played in that game, and he was a little rusty at the start, but then you could really see him lock in. And once Mike Smith locked in that game, I kind of knew where that game was going. And that's been huge for them, and Gaudreau has been massive for them. And Gaudreau on that power play is just a weapon. Like, he just makes everybody better. And Sean Monahan, boy, this is this is his year. That hat trick, I think, believe it or not, was his first hat trick, but he actually got it on the power play. It would have been a natural hat trick, but Philly sneaked in a goal in between. But he actually had a hat trick on the power play too, which is crazy.
Well, I mean, I know that I've watched a few Calgary games, and I know that they're not exactly enthused with the way Hamonic has played for them. They thought they were going to be getting more out of him, and Hamonic is a stay-at-home defenseman who's tough. I think he's a good second pairing guy. So maybe there was too much hype over him. The one concern about the Flames is not the number one goaltender, Russ, and you can get away with having a subpar backup, but Eddie Lack is a sieve right now. I think his goals against is over 5, and Gillies is not ready, so they may have to go out and get themselves a backup before the trade deadline.
I think they're going to stick with Lack. I just think Smith being healthy is like a quarterback in the NFL. Like, that's their best chance, and I think they're just going to go with that. I honestly don't think they're going to do anything, and maybe by the end of the season, Gillies will show him more, because he showed a lot at the AHL level. He came in relief in that game last week, and so. But I was watching Gillies in practice too. I think he's really close, so I think they're okay. But right now, this team, I mean, there's no reason they can't win a Stanley Cup. I mean, again, I picked Anaheim to beat them in the conference final. Yeah, now, Anaheim's been holding on, and they've done a great job of actually holding on. I saw Rito Berra got a win. Yeah, I mean that's a big deal for Anaheim.
Kev, I have to say that one of the bigger surprises so far has been the Detroit Red Wings. I mean, Jimmy Howard, he's up there in the leaders of the goals against right now, which, I mean, I know he had a really good year in a short window last year, but I didn't think that we would see a repeat of that. He's playing great, and they seem to just, they're getting enough offense and enough defense to win games. They're doing pretty well right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Jeff Blashill, this is pretty much all you can hope for in terms of maintaining and keeping your job. And the younger players that have to develop, are looking good. Dylan Larkin, Mantha, and Anthony Ciu are all playing well. Yes. And that's his job. His job is to get those 3 ready. I mean,
it looks like Nyquist is playing better too.
Yeah, he is for sure. But that, that isn't the key of the rebuild.
Right.
They have 2 different teams. Sometimes they look like the slowest team in the NHL. Mm-hmm. When they've got Zetterberg and Eriksson and Cronwell and that crew is out there. And then they look like the fastest team in the NHL when, Dylan Larkin is flying around and Anthony Ciu, Darren Helm, Glendening. They have a lot of skaters on that team, and they can look really sharp. But, I think even the play of the defense, they expected Howard. Howard was good last year, too. He just got injured. And I think they weren't surprised that Howard's playing well. They have been surprised by how well the defense has played. Cronwell on one leg, he hasn't been outstanding, but he has not been bad. Last year, he looked like, oh my gosh, it was embarrassing. Yeah. And he has figured out how to play on one leg, and he's been credible. And Eriksson has been better. And Trevor Daley is doing, he's not putting up any points because he's not really an offensive defenseman, but he's getting the puck out of the zone. He's been very effective. DeKaiser is back now. Like that, it's probably going as well as it could go for the Red Wings. If someone can get hurt and they could figure out a way to bring Bertuzzi up, and they can see what he can do. They don't expect him to be a star, but they think he'll play.
Bertuzzi's a good, tough guy who's got some decent speed. I mean, he's not like his dad. He's got good speed, and he does have a little dangle in his game. Not a ton, but you know what? As a third liner, fourth liner for them, he could do something for them.
Yeah, no, that's how they see him. They see him as a third liner. It's his uncle, by the way, not his dad.
His uncle, yes, sorry.
Yeah, but Yeah, so the key for them, as it has been since Nicholas Winston retired, is they have to find a top pairing defenseman. And maybe the plan now would be, since they haven't, they may not be high enough to draft one, is that they got to hope that in 2019 there's 9 guys out there, and chances are good that all of them, or most of them, not all of them, will be re-signed. But I'm talking about Doughty and McDonough and Carlson and Ekman Larson and Myers. There's a whole host of potential unrestricted free agents. If 1 or 2 of them were available, and if they can convince them that coming to play in this unbelievable new arena with these younger forwards that they have, if they can get one of those guys, and suddenly their fortunes, they might be able to pull it off. What they're trying to do, I think, is one of the most difficult feats in hockey, and that is to rebuild on the fly. That's very difficult to do.
It's hard to do, but they probably feel like they had to because of the new arena, and the ticket prices aren't the cheapest. And
and they had a lot of guys under contracts and a lot of guys that weren't unmovable. But $14 million is coming off in 2 years, and they will have money. And who knows? I mean,
I'll tell you what, I put them now just below the Devils in the sense that they're going to hang around for a playoff spot. Like they pinned me on the radio the other day. They wanted me to say, hey, we all believe that 5 teams out of the Metro are all going to make the playoffs. And I said, I can't say that yet, because a team like Detroit, you have turned me around on them, Kev. I've watched a little more of them, and I've said, you know what? I can't discount them yet. And I definitely can't discount, a team like that, because what if? I mean, the young guys, they sometimes can do it.
I can't discount a team like Boston, even though they're having.
No, and I won't discount Boston. They were the other ones I brought up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that too. Boston has, has guys.
So many injuries, and they've been hanging around.
Yeah.
Going back to Calgary too, one point I wanted to bring up, which I think is important. Like, I think Jaromir Jagr is really helping Sam Bennett. Like, now he's on that line with Bennett and Jankowski, and I watched them live, and I thought, wow. Like, they're really learning from him. Like, he is, he's saying it, and it's simple stuff, but he's just telling them, you guys are so fast. I'm not fast, but the puck is fast, and I can pass it fast. So you guys fly down the, and I'll get the puck to you. I can, because he has, as Jagr says, and it's not conceit, it's just the truth. I can hang on to the puck better than most guys in this league, and he definitely can do that. And I think he's helped them. He's given Bennett, to me, and watching him a lot more confidence.
It's funny. I was watching him intently in practice recently, just a few days ago, beginning of the week, and then watched, or maybe it was the end of last week. My weeks are running over, and watched him in the game. But in practice, especially, he is happy. He is laughing. Like, even a practice after they just got killed by Detroit in an 8-2 game, and they had an exceptionally long practice. Mike remembers me texting him saying I might be late for the show. He was still all smiles, helping guys out, and he was jumping in with different guys. So he really is sort of coaching up other guys. So, because someone even sitting next to me in the press box was like, I don't know, is this the end for Jagr? And I said, I don't know, because you know what? They're not going to trade him. They don't even probably care that his point production isn't great, because there's everything else now that he's doing for them that's helping gel that team. And so I don't think they can move Jagr anyhow.
But going into the Detroit game, his point production was a 50-point pace. That's pretty much where it was.
And that's great. I mean, if it stays at that,
that's what it was going into the game. He didn't get a point in that game. Did he get a point against Philly?
No, he didn't in Philly either.
Yeah, so it's fallen off. But he was doing fine. He was contributing, and he had chances in the Detroit game. So
couple quick rumors things, and it, as usual with any star player who's close to being a UFA coming to Toronto, rumors pick up. We mentioned on the show last time Kevin was on about Oliver Ekman Larson. Bob McKenzie wrote a piece regarding him and the fact that there hasn't been any kind of discussion of the Arizona Coyotes trading him. He's a year away from being a free agent. He's a great defenseman. He scored the game-winning goal yesterday against the Leafs. But the things could change regarding his status in Arizona based on, what is perceived as an icy relationship with Rick Tocchet, and also the fact that the building situation in Arizona still is not resolved. He would prefer to stay in Arizona, but if they pick up stakes and move to someplace like Seattle or Houston, that might affect, similar to Tavares, he wants something solid before he agrees to sign an extension, and that might be too much of a risk for Chaika. Now, Kevin, I think it makes sense that Ekman-Larsson, and a lot of things have to fall in place, but I think it makes sense that he's maybe at the deadline, maybe over the summer, but I think things could fall into place that he does get dealt.
Well, I think it's possible. I don't believe John Chaika has any interest in trading him, but like we talked before the show, if the circumstances are that Ekman-Larsson says, look, I'm not re-signing here, or if Chaika perceives that the relationship between Tocchet and Ekman-Larsson deteriorates to the point where it's a one or the other, then maybe you would trade him. I mean, they would get a lot for him. That's for sure. So you'd just have to weigh that in. But I right now I just don't see Chaika even entertaining that because like what's the message in Arizona if you can't retain your players? And that stuff just when players defect, it begets more defections. So right.
I'll say this, Kev. Like the guys in the chat room were saying, Brian Lawton said Nylander for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That is not enough. William Nylander is not enough for. It doesn't matter if he's only got a year and change on his contract. That would not be enough.
And Mackenzie said the same thing because William Nylander is not perceived as being a center throughout the league. He's perceived as being a winger, but I don't think the Leafs would trade William Nylander for that top four defenseman. They have a lot of young assets, and I think that the direction that they're going to go is they're going to trade, a first-round pick and one of their good prospects to a team for a defenseman who's making a lot of money that they're looking to maybe dump. And that might be the scenario. I don't know if that fits with Ekman-Larsson. I think that situation is all in his control, whether he wants to stay with that organization or not. The other defenseman that there was a little bit of chatter about last week, I think I wrote about, was Tyson Barrie of the Colorado Avalanche. And he's been a guy that gets mentioned a lot, Kev, in trade rumors ever since he signed that contract with Colorado. And now with the acquisition of Girard, who they like and is playing well since the whole Matt Duchene three-way deal, it might free up Joe Sakic to trade Barrie if he can get a good enough package. Have you heard any increase of chatter? Because everybody always says around Thanksgiving there's always an increase.
No, for sure. But I have heard GMs say the same thing about Joe Sakic they said before. Look, he's difficult to make a deal with, and like what happened, even though he hit a home run in his trade to Duchene, there's no question that he hit a home run on that. Right. It doesn't change the fact that he's still going to be hard to make a deal with. And I think GMs are looking at it in that type of situation. Like, I don't think they're in a hurry to try to engage in.
No, I think they'll have talks at the draft. That's when they'll have talks.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I have not heard anything about Tyson Barrie.
Yeah. And the other one, and it was brought up on Saturday on Hockey Night in Canada regarding the contract status of 3 Leaf free agents, just to touch on this. They have not had substantive talks with Komarov, with Bozak, with Van Riemsdyk. It is my belief, and this is not based on anything that I've heard, just my belief, based on where the Leafs are in terms of prospects that they have in the minors that are ready to play in the NHL, they're going to deal one of these guys. Probably, I would say the guy that they would be easiest to deal would be Bozak, because they've been playing Patrick Marleau up the middle more often over the last few weeks, and losing Bozak for nothing or losing JVR for the cap space, it doesn't add up to me. That's not a Lou Lamoriello move, Kev. I think when he's got an asset, he's going to move it if he can get something worthwhile back for it.
Yeah, and I've heard from multiple sources that the Devils are really hot after Van Riemsdyk. And they need another scorer in New Jersey. It would make a lot of sense. Again, I haven't looked to the fit from Toronto's perspective. But I could see them trading for sure one of those guys. Although Yeah, I think I would have to agree with you. I think Bozak would be the guy that I think they would be more willing to trade. I think they need Van Riemsdyk.
Yeah, I agree. I think they need Van Riemsdyk, but I don't. But I think there's a limit to what they'll pay him. Bozak, they could get something for, but I'm going to give you a bigger name. I mean, the bigger name who could potentially be traded, who doesn't have a contract, and I don't hear any negotiations, is Josh Bailey, who is 23 points in 20 games and completely underappreciated on a good Islander team right now. Like, what's up with Josh Bailey? There is no love for this guy.
Yeah, no, you're right, and he's been viewed as a disappointment until this.
Yeah.
So, but he's played well. I mean, you start listing surprising players. I mean, it's pretty surprising, even though they're good players, that Schwartz and Braden Shen are in the top 5 scorers in the league. That's surprising, but the other guy is Bailey. Like what?
Yeah. I'm not as surprised at Schwartz. Braden Shen definitely, because he was only doing it on the power play for Philly. He has expanded on that.
Yeah, but there was no indication that these guys were going to be in the top, 5 or 6 scorers. I mean, they're good players. I mean, I'm not. But anyway, but Bailey has really been considered.
And he only makes $33,000 under $4 million. He's like 3.3. So, like, that's a bargain if they trade him too, even on a walk year. But it's just crazy. Like, I don't know why. And he's good friends with John Tavares. Like, they're close.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to see what's going to happen there. So,
well, great show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.